Well, TV fans, a huge twist made her character Charlotte Hale go in new exciting directions in season 3 of Westworld. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby, and I'm very excited to sit here with Tessa Thompson. Thanks so much for joining me here, Tessa.
Thanks for having me.
You know, one of the fascinating things, Charlotte was always sort of this very corporate, cold character, and this season we get to peel back the layers of her a little bit, discovering she has a son. She had a long-standing relationship. What is it like to explore the softer side of her a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it was so interesting because I didn't know any of those things about Charlotte. I mean, I think as an actor, you're always trying to fill in the blanks, the things that you don't know or understand about the character. As far as the script is concerned, you're trying to, sort of make up on your own. But to be honest, I hadn't considered that Charlotte was somebody with a family. I thought she was this really brilliant sort of depiction of what corporate power looks like, of what it looks like when people in charge of a corporation put the bottom line and money over compassion or kindness, or over the people that they serve. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed playing that. I think particularly getting to play that as a young woman is really rare. I think men get to occupy that space a lot in television and film, these sort of businessmen that are tough and you kind of sometimes even root for them when they do things that are pretty despisable. But I've never really seen that with a woman. So I sort of loved that portrayal of her. But I think this season was discovering all the things about her that I did not know, and the ability, as you said, to find a soft side, to find a space that was vulnerable. I think that was, a really exciting thing to play. And then seeing where the season went to, I think she now is, going to be arguably even tougher and harsher than any Charlotte that we've ever known before. So it was nice to get to be soft.
You end in quite a dark place at the end of the season. And I should say for everyone watching at home, the big twist there, the question all season is what host is inside Charlotte's body. And it turns out it's Dolores, which I was hitting myself for not guessing that earlier. But how early did you know that secret? Did Jonathan Nolan or Lisa Joy let you in on that beforehand?
Yeah, I knew at the top of this season, which it is the most that I've ever known. In the past, I've not known it a lot, to be honest. But I did know that. I didn't know where I would go throughout the season, but I knew in the beginning. And I think the trick was, I had started to play an iteration of Dolores in the past at the sort of the end of season 2. So I had sort of played with what Dolores looks like, but I think this season was the complexity of really, having to inhabit the skin and the life of Charlotte, have a real distaste for that, begin to have a real sort of curiosity, and eventually a sort of care about the the woman that I'm pretending to be, and this sort of descent from my connection to Dolores as we know her, and not trying to give that away to the audience, but there's also so much delicious fun to be had in playing with Evan's tonality as Dolores. I think particularly in the moments where you see Dolores having long earned revenge, for example, with the Man in Black this season, it's really fun to get to pull out some of her performance takes to unsettle, the person opposite me. So that has been a real interesting thing this season for me to play as an actor.
Yeah. The cool thing really is that you kind of are creating a whole new character essentially in this season, because there's the pull of Hale inside her. There's the pull of Dolores. So how did you kind of find the balance of getting those recognizable traits that had to be there, but also bringing forth this new character with new motivations?
I don't know. I hope I did. I mean, it's the interesting thing is typically you would think in this season 3 of a show that the actors are really settling into character, and you can kind of, which is not to say that you ever phone it in, you never want to do that as an actor, but you have a comfortability at least with the character enough that you kind of show up to work and the circumstances change, but the essential nature of the person, the way they speak, the way they walk, what drives them internally is sort of a thing that is a bit more fixed. And that is just never the case on this show. And particularly for me, it hasn't been. So I think it requires real dexterity, flexibility, and sort of relinquishing control in a way. I don't know. It also requires a tremendous amount of trust, because even though I knew, for example, in the beginning that I was playing some version of Dolores, like when we first see me in that scene, Jonah, who directed me in that scene, was like, he almost wanted me to find what it would feel like if you were born as a baby into adult skin, how sort of disorienting that would be. And some of these ideas are really odd and complicated and hard, and they feel really challenging to play, and you kind of have to trust a lot. So I think that has been the approach for me. And then, I feel really lucky that I have such a generous co-star in Evan, Rachel Wood, because she's been very generous with me in terms of, I think sometimes as actors, you don't want to talk about how the, for lack of a better term, how the sausage is made. There's so much mystery wrapped up in what you do. And sometimes when you talk about like how the thing is made, it sort of, I don't know, reveals the mystery in a way where you're like, oh yeah, acting is like any other sort of craft. There's like, there are things that you do. It's not just pure inspiration. It's also like work and figuring it out. And all that to say that she's been very generous with me of peeling back those layers of mystery and going like, oh, this is how in practical terms I play Dolores. These are things that I do physically. She would be so kind. I would like sometimes send her lines of mine and she would send me back a voice memo so I could literally listen to the way that she would perform something and keep that in back of mind when I was figuring out, how to play this character. So that doesn't really answer your question. I don't know. I think that's the fun thing about Westworld is that it requires, I don't know. It's a whole new bag of tricks, I think, that I find so endlessly challenging and fascinating and keeps me working, keeps me honest.
Yeah, the two of you have a really beautiful moment in that hotel room scene where your character's so scared and nervous and literally doesn't know what skin she's in, and you kind of as an audience member don't know where it's going to go. You're figuring out, is it going to be romantic? Is it paternal? What is this? What was it like shooting that with her? That
was one of my favorite things to shoot all season. We shot that scene until it was a night shoot, even though we were indoors. And this season has been, just because of scheduling, it's been by and large a lot of night shoots, because when we're outdoors, it typically is night. But it means that sometimes even when you're indoors, you're shooting. So we shot at night. So we shot until like 8 or 9 in the morning. Which sometimes when you're working that late, at least for me, it adds this, there's like this, I don't know, this like a kind of vulnerability in a weird way, because there's something about it in quality that is kind of surreal. At least for me, I love night shoots for that reason. But additionally, I thought it was just so well crafted in terms of writing. I'm so happy that you said that you didn't understand or know where it would go, because I think that's entirely what was scripted. There's a stage direction, which remains one of my favorite pieces of stage direction I've ever read, which says that between the two of them, there's no human corollary for what their relationship is. It's part sapphic. It's maker and the maid. It's like it's so rich, and essentially like we as humans can't even understand what that dynamic is. Right. And I love that. I mean, Evan and I were both like, I don't know how we play that, but we'll give it a shot. And I think That's something that I love so much about the show, is it's asking very human questions, but inside of a landscape that isn't entirely the world as we know it. And I think it inhabits this place of sort of pure imagination. And then also the direction of that scene, I think, really helps. You have these really beautiful sort of split shots of our faces. So as much as I think Evan and I, have been working towards finding a really interesting dynamic in character, I think the work that everyone does on that scene and that episode in particular contributes to this feeling that you describe. So I feel so lucky to get to play inside of frames that are that well constructed and orchestrated.
You also get just this amazing wardrobe to wear on the show. My favorite was this epic power cape, which you used to take down, guard an elevator. Do you have any sort of input on like what you think her style would be?
I sort of, yes. We had like lots of fittings in there, and everyone is so collaborative on the show. And also, I think because the show has a real specificity. For example, I didn't know that when I was doing that fitting, I was doing a fitting where this cape, this sort of jacket, was going to be used as an instrument of violence. But the costume designer knew that, because Lisa and Jonah knew that. So sometimes I sort of dig inside of the fittings, because you can learn things about the arc of the season, because they are so specific. Like I remember for those fittings, for example, I'd be like, well, this jacket's cool, and it's like it was a search to find the right one. It was very very detailed, and if I look back in retrospect now, it makes sense, because what the jacket was going to do in episodes. So I think that's something that I think is so interesting about the show, is everything it's just really meticulously drawn. There's nothing sort of broad about the way that the show is drawn, just down to the costumes. It's all really specific and based on character, and there's big ideas all over the show, even inside of what we wear and the things that the instruments that we use and the technology, how it's presented. So but I have to tell you, it was very exciting, because I spent the last season of the show wearing the same thing the whole time. Well, there are two things. I had that dress from last season. I think I've had probably in some of the episodes this season, in one episode, I have more costume changes than I previously did on the whole show, 2 seasons of the show. So I really enjoyed that. And then also getting to see other characters that had been in the same, Dolores had been in that blue dress, for example, getting to see them in their sort of future selves. I think that's been really such a visually compelling thing about the show this season.
Yeah, I was wondering if there was more like training for you, stunt training, because you get in that sequence where you take the guy out with a cape. It's like this amazing action sequence where she has to break free from the Delos headquarters, and it reminded me of like a scene from the Terminator. That's what it seemed like. Was that what it felt like to you?
Well, yes and no. Because the nature of the show, some of that sequence I shot many months prior, and that sort of happens sometimes in the show where you shoot bits and pieces in different locations. And I even sort of forgot that they would all exist in one sequence. So it didn't feel, if I had done it all at once or all in the same week, I think I would have really felt like, Sarah Connor, and really felt like a real action hero, because it was dispersed in terms of how it was shot, not so much in the execution. I think one thing that's interesting, though, is, when the Dolores consciousness is inside of Charlotte, obviously there's this, fear of being found out as this imposter. I'm a highly sophisticated machine, so I can, pretend to be human with a lot of ease. But I think what's so fun about that sequence is I'm in full survival mode, and I don't have to worry about seeming human. So it means that in some of those sequences, I can, shoot at a target without looking at it. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first time that I did that, I don't remember who was directing, because we switch a lot. And like I said, I've shot that over many months, so forgive me. but I remember at the time them being like, don't you think you have to look? And I was like, kind of. So I tried one like that, and then we all sort of decided that it was much cooler when I didn't, that when I could take these hits really like a machine, where you could suddenly see this machine in human skin be just a fierce piece of machinery. And I love that challenge physically.
Yeah. You have two really great emotional moments that were impressive to me, because there's one where you have to look at that video of Charlotte, what she thinks is going to be her last message to her son at the Westworld massacre. And that's just you on camera, emoting and reacting to that with no dialogue. And then, of course, the heartbreaking moment at the end of episode 6 where the car explodes and you're through crazy burnt makeup and all those special effects and prosthetics, you have to turn and just look and tell the story of seeing your son dead. So is it difficult to drop into a moment like that where there's not dialogue, where there's not a scene partner to work off of?
I don't know. Not for me. They're sort of my favorite moments. This is not typically the case on this show, because this show's very, very well written, but I am typically in collaborations where I'm free enough to really give suggestions, particularly when I get to produce a project too. I'm an advocate a lot of the time for do I have to say this? Can I act it? Because I think for humans, that tends to be the case. There are so many times when we're struck with emotion and it gets sort of stuck somewhere in our throats. I think it's very rare, actually, to have access to word and to language. And also, as cathartic as it is to watch an actor be really emotional and present in a scene with another actor, the truth is, I think for many people, it's really hard to access depth of emotion when you're being watched by someone else. So I always find it really compelling, those moments that are private. And both of those moments that you mentioned are there moments when she gets to be entirely unguarded because she's alone. And so for me, those are moments that I sort of love. And then maybe it's just my own preoccupation. I think I really am interested in loss and love. And I think something that she's responding to, Shaloris or her Loris is responding to in that moment, particularly of watching the video of herself speak to her son, is she's recognizing the loss of that human's ability to become the mother that they sort of always wanted to be, that they thought that they would have time in the future to really lean in and be a good mother. And I think this really empathetic machine, this machine that is capable of compassion, boundless compassion that we don't even necessarily understand as humans, can watch this and go, wow, what a loss. What a loss. And I think it makes her personally feel like maybe I can do that. Maybe I can become the mother that this person wasn't able to. And maybe I have to. Maybe I have a responsibility to because of this young boy. And I don't know. I really love to sit with inside of the opportunity to ruminate. I think, I don't know, I love being imaginative and getting to have a spaceship and all the fun things that I've gotten to do recently. But I think a part of me, I'm just a glutton for good old human, heartbreak. I like it. I really, really, really like it. And I think also in terms of inside of science fiction, I think when you can find moments that just feel really human, that people can relate to, and I think so many people can relate to the loss of a loved one. Those are the kind of things that I think watching those things for us become really, cathartic and healing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they worked very well. I can't wait to see what her master plan is when we get into season 4, whenever that comes about. So everyone who's watching, make sure you subscribe to Gold Derby. Keep up to date with us throughout Emmy season. And Tessa, thanks so much for talking Westworld with me.
Yeah, the pleasure was all mine. Thanks for having me.